I would say that there are enough signals available to indicate that as far as Iran is concerned, there is now an agreement. I should mention to you what the terms of the agreement are. Um,
Yeah.
Iran has committed itself to maintain maximum enrichment of 60%. It is not below 10% as was agreed to earlier in the JCPOA, but it is not 80 or 90%. It is 60%. So that is the most important issue that they have said. The others are less important. They will release American prisoners. They have also said that they will not carry out any attacks against US targets in Syria and in Iraq. And therefore, there is a, you could say that certain immediate concerns that the Americans have.
For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan. Welcome to another edition of the Gist. And now we are informed by Israel that the US and Iran have come to an agreement on their contentious issues between them, including, of course, the nuclear deal. And the wonder of this whole arrangement is that this has not been confirmed by either the US or Iran. And we have the Israelis claiming so. And from what we understand, there is nothing written in this understanding between Tehran and Washington. So, without further ado, I'm going to go to my guest, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, former ambassador to Iran and West Asia scholar. So, welcome. This must be number one, the first time in diplomacy, an unwritten agreement between two countries. Is this how diplomacy is going to proceed, sir, from now on?
I know it's a fascinating development. Firstly, I must clarify that there is no agreement as yet. There is no agreement, even an unwritten agreement. What we have are driblets of information coming to us over the last few weeks. These pieces of information have spoken of US and Iranian officials meeting each other. The first meeting took place in December last year when Robert Malik called on the Iranian permanent representative in New York. After that, we know for sure that 3 meetings took place in Muscat in February, March, and May. And we know that this was Brett McGurk, he is the man dealing with West Asia and North Africa as part of the National Security Council. After that, we know that Sayyid Haytham, the ruler of Oman, visited Tehran and briefed the supreme leader about what has been happening between the two sides, and I presume sought the support of the supreme leader. Within a few days, the supreme leader on 11 June made a public statement saying that he supports a new agreement on the nuclear issue. He assured his establishment, the nuclear establishment, that our infrastructure will remain intact, and he also added for good measure that as in the past, Iran remains completely opposed to a nuclear weapon. This is the background. On 14th June, the foreign minister of Oman made a public statement. He said in the press conference that Saudi Arabia, that Iran and the US have been meeting each other on the issue relating to prisoners. That there are 3 American citizens in Iran in jail, and the United States has been agitating for their release. He said this agreement on release of prisoners has occurred, and he also appreciated that the two sides have been talking to each other seriously on the nuclear issue. Separately, From Israel, we have been getting a series of news reports, obviously based on government briefings. There are reports that a few days earlier, Netanyahu briefed his cabinet about the agreement and publicly took the posture that Israel is not going to support any such agreement. These are so called interim agreement. At the same time, it was added by the news reporter that the feedback from government is that Israel will live with the agreement. So you are getting two sounds, two noises, one public for the public consumption and the other for the real thing that Israel is on board with regard to whatever agreement comes out as a result of these discussions. I have a feeling that within a few days or maybe a couple of weeks, some kind of agreement will see the light of day and we will get more hard information about it.
What is the purpose behind all the secrecy? Is it because they're still finding their way around? There's been no agreement on some of the key issues that divide them?
The biggest problem that we have here is American public opinion and the concerns that the US administration has with regard to the opposition to any arrangement that the Americans make with Iran. It is likely to become a matter of discussion and debate within the political scenario in the country and could be used against Joe Biden in the presidential campaign. So I think this is the reason why the US is keeping very, very low key. As you know, now we are in the third year of the presidency, and within a year we will be in election mode. Within a few months we will be in election mode. The United States frequently has found it difficult to proceed with the discussions with Iran because of domestic opinion. The last year was they were going to have their midterm elections, and the fear was that if we were to make progress on the JCPOA, we would have to ease the sanctions, give the Iranians access to several $billion, and that would become a matter of discussion within the campaign. So that matter was then delayed. The Iranians, on their part, have also been putting extraordinary pressure on the Western alliance by gradually going in for increased enrichment of uranium. They went up to 60%, and then they even touched 84% before they came back. They have also developed centrifuges. They are far away from the bomb. Even the Israelis have said that they are 1 to 2 years away from actually having a bomb. But the two ingredients that you need in this regard, the enriched uranium and the centrifuges, both of these are now available with the Iranians. So I think it became a matter of urgency for the Americans to move forward quickly and to see if you could have an arrangement that would prevent the enrichment, it would prevent Iran from acquiring a bomb on the one hand. Also, they were anxious that the Israelis should not carry out their repeated threat of assaulting the Iranians. And if they had that kind of assault, the relative peace that you find in West Asia today would obviously come to an end. And the consequences of that are not clear at all, because it's very easy, as we have seen in the case of Syria and Yemen, very easy to start a war, extremely difficult to end it, and you never know which way it will end. Therefore, the Americans were anxious to ensure that regardless of the situation at home, the domestic scenario at home, some kind of agreement must be reached with the Iranians so that you are able to A, prevent weaponization, and B, prevent a regional conflagration.
So you mentioned American public opinion. What is it that has driven the US-Iran relationship to such an extent that they can't agree on anything. They hate each other. I mean, what is it? Is it the hostage
And I
crisis?
must clarify to you the real situation. The American opinion was very hostile to the Islamic Revolution
Yeah.
when their diplomats were taken hostage and were paraded on television screens and they were blindfolded and handcuffed. It was seemed as a very severe humiliation as far as American public was concerned. But this was in 1979.
Yeah.
By the
Yeah.
time Ronald Reagan came to power, became president, within a few weeks, those people were released. In fact, we now know that the Ronald Reagan team deliberately asked the Iranians to delay the release so that he would get the credit rather than Jimmy Carter, who lost the election. But after that, it is important to know, and it is very well covered in literature on the subject, that it is Israel that has been feeding US political establishment against Iran. So this visceral animosity for Iran that you find in American public opinion and more importantly in the American political establishment is almost entirely fed by the Israel lobby in the United States. The principal action in this regard has been taken by the neoconservative movement all through the 1990s, and you know how dominant they were for a certain period of time. They are the ones who have been constantly, they have been pushing. They are American citizens, but they have been upholding Israel's interests far above those of their own country. I believe, and it is well documented today, I believe that the Israel lobby should be held specifically responsible for this state of relations. But they are so powerful today that it is impossible to reverse it. It has now, this animosity for Iran has gone so deep into the political establishment. For example, the Republican Party takes a very harsh posture on the subject of dealing with Iran, and they use language which you never use for any other country. There is no, as far as the Republican Party is concerned, there is no good that comes from Iran. But this is also bipartisan. Recall here that all the information relating to Israel's, that is relating to Iran's so-called nuclear program has come from Israel.
Yeah.
And what they have achieved in turn is the ever crippling, ever increasing sanctions on Iran. Therefore, for the last 20 years, you find this bizarre scenario of Iran suffering more and more sanctions. When there was an agreement on the nuclear issue, the opposition to the agreement came not from US public opinion, which welcomed it, but from Israel. And Netanyahu has said publicly that he is responsible for persuading Donald Trump to withdraw from the agreement. Therefore, in 2018, Donald Trump withdrew from the agreement, and you know the rest. Now you find something interesting has happened in the US. The Israel lobby is now not as pro Netanyahu as they used to be in the past. They are pro Israel but not pro Netanyahu. Donald Trump tapped into the Christian evangelist movement in order to support Israel's agenda in West Asia. But that's another matter. As far as Iran is concerned, it still remains a very serious hate figure as far as large sections of American opinion and overwhelmingly its own political establishment, particularly from the Republican, but it also includes certain sections of the Democratic Party as well.
Now there's this reference to the Iranian supreme leader, apparently saying that the JCPOA, they're not happy with it, and they want a new agreement. What's the confusion over here? Is the
I
JCPOA
should
now
clarify
done?
here, it's not exactly as you have mentioned. After Sultan Sayyid Haytham met him in Tehran at the end of May, he made a statement before the officials dealing with the nuclear establishment, they were part of the nuclear establishment, on 11th June. He signaled, he said, Iran is ready for a new agreement. Up to that time, Iran's official position was that you must revive the JCPOA as it was. You withdrew from it, we followed it in good faith, therefore you must get back to the JCPOA. This was the formal position as declared publicly. Many of us knew, as talks were going on in Vienna up to August or October last year, many of us knew that the JCPOA as it stood at that time is not likely to be revived in that same way. Many of its provisions had become outdated. Recall here that the Iranians had enriched far beyond what was provided for in the JCPOA, and many of the deadlines mentioned were also not adhered to. Therefore, strictly speaking, no one really thought that the JCPOA could be revived as is. Therefore, when Ayatollah Khamenei made the statement that he is ready for a new agreement, it was a significant shift in the Iranian position on the subject. It was, that means he had been told by Sayyid Haytham and by his own officials, after all they had been talking to each other in February, March and May, that we now are looking at a new agreement. It is not an agreement that revives JCPOA, it is entirely focused on the nuclear issue. From the Western point of view, why the JCPOA could not be revived is simply because other issues had come in. When Donald Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, he said that he is going to deliver a better agreement which would look into certain other issues about Iran, relating to Iran, that had been raised. For example, the regional security scenario. There were concerns about Iran's role with regard to endangering the security of the countries in the region. Certain countries were concerned about Iran's activities in their domestic politics. There were concerns also relating to Iran's development of ballistic missiles. Now, all of these topics, however significant, could be addressed only in an environment of total trust between the two countries. This is not there. Therefore, I think very wisely, both Iran and the United States decided that let us focus our attention entirely on the nuclear weapons issue. From the Iranian point of view, they thought to themselves, look, we don't need a weapon. We have already demonstrated the capacity to attain a weapon in a set of circumstances. We don't need to go any further. Maintaining nuclear ambivalence or nuclear ambiguity suited the Iranian interest at that stage, and I think it still does. Therefore, Ayatollah Khamenei made the statement, number one, that he is ready for a new agreement. He also clarified that this infrastructure will remain intact. So, there is no cause to worry. He was addressing his scientists, the nuclear scientists. So, he made it very clear that the establishment, the infrastructure would remain in place. And as he said this, it was greeted with very great applause. And after that, he said, we don't want a weapon at all. So, I think that statement of Ayatollah Khamenei, that is Iran's statement at the highest level, more solemn than any written agreement, is the green signal that the Americans might have wanted. That now, see, you know how it goes. First you have the opener, then you have engagement. You have engagement over 3 months rapidly. Then you brief the supreme leader through Sultan of Oman, who has a positive history with regard to relations with Iran. After all, Sultan Qaboos, his predecessor, had hosted for more than a year US-Iranian officials in Muscat in the run-up to the 2015 agreement. So, yes, he was the right person to give this message. and I think that is how it has gone forward. So I would say that there are enough signals available to indicate that as far as Iran is concerned, there is now an agreement. I should mention to you what the terms of the agreement are. Uh,
Yeah.
Iran has committed itself to maintain maximum enrichment of 60%. It is not below 10% as was agreed to earlier in the JCPOA, but it is not 80 or 90%. It is 60%. So that is the most important issue that they have said. The others are less important. They will release American prisoners. They have also said that they will not carry out any attacks against US targets in Syria and in Iraq. And therefore, there is a, you could say that certain immediate concerns that the Americans have, I think they have addressed those. The prisoners, the enrichment being frozen, the prisoners, and the not attacking American targets. From the American point of view, they have done something very interesting. They have signaled that they will defreeze Iranian accounts which have been frozen in different parts of the world since the revolution. It is said that these accounts taken together would be valued at about $80 billion. And
Gosh.
in return for the release of the prisoners, the US has already instructed Korea to release $7 billion in frozen assets and Iraq to release $3 billion in frozen assets. That means as soon as the prisoners go back, Iran gets $10 billion. Do recall, these are Iranian, this is Iranian money.
Yeah.
This is, these are payments for Iranian oil or Iranian services which were frozen in a set of circumstances when the sanctions were placed on Iran. Now, I have a feeling that this I would call it a good faith agreement. It is said that it will not be a written agreement because every written agreement has to go to Congress for approval. And Biden knows that he is not getting that approval. Certainly, it will be a very ugly spat in the House. So
Yeah.
it doesn't need that approval. So he doesn't, it is not, and since no US sanctions are being eased, there cannot
see.
be an issue, Republicans raising issues with Biden. It's not us. And the reason for focusing on the prisoners is that they want to showcase the return of these prisoners as a great achievement of the US administration. So it is win-win on all sides that with least effort you get the maximum return. I would like to say to you that good faith is a two-way thing. The two countries have no history of good faith. They have a bunch of grievances with each other which go back 40 years. They have never been able to clear the desk. You find that when the Iranians were ready for a dialogue with the Americans were not ready. And when the Americans were ready for a dialogue, the Iranians were not ready. So in both sides, both countries, this relationship is a very serious domestic matter. Now there is an additional grievance on the Iranian side that the Americans withdrew from the agreement because they want to effect regime change or they want to encourage vociferous tendencies within Iran by funding minority dissidents, ethnic dissidents within the country. And then of course increasing the sanctions. Iran feels very rightly that look, we've done no wrong and you've impoverished us for no fault of ours. So they have a set of grievances, very serious grievances. And the other point I will make to you is the world has moved on, the region has moved on, Iran has moved on. Today it's not the same Iran of 5 or 6 years ago. The regional scenario has changed. Iran today has very substantial ties with both China and Russia. The rest of West Asia also has now grasped strategic independence. There is no country in West Asia today that is beholden to the Americans for its foreign policy decision making, starting with Saudi Arabia and including Israel as well. So you find, and then of course you have the Iran Saudi agreement brokered by China. They are already engaged with each other. As I am speaking to you, the Saudi foreign minister is in Tehran. Their whole region believes, and believes very rightly, that such an agreement, however flimsy its base might be, it is unwritten, it is an informal arrangement, it's an arrangement. I would call it an arrangement, and very rightly you have called it an understanding. Let us see where it goes. We don't know. It is an experiment in terms of two nations with a long record of mutual animosity, mutual suspicion, mutual distrust, mutual absence of confidence, actually talking to each other, trying to put the bitterness behind them for mutual interest, attempting to see whether over a period of time a new relationship is possible.
So, last question. Given that they are now reaching a new agreement, does that mean India can resume, normal relationships with Iran, or those sanctions remain and we'll still be in the line of fire?
See, the factual position is all American sanctions remain in place. This agreement doesn't affect those at all. At the same time, you know that our project relating to Chabahar
Yeah.
was not covered by US sanctions, and in fact the Americans were encouraging us to pursue that project. The problem is no company is ready to come forward. The only company that bid for that tender was the Chinese companies. No company is willing to bid and win that project because they are not sure. They don't want to be in the American gun sight and be shot at, because the Americans have said initially orally and then in writing that these Chabahar projects are not covered. But nobody trusts the Americans. Nobody believes that they will be, therefore they prefer to get out of the way and keep Iran on the back burner as far as their business engagement is concerned. A decision to deal with Iran and pursue projects with Iran is an Indian decision. It is India too that has, now you're talking about Chabahar, what about oil? We completely stopped buying Iranian oil. It used to be the number 2 supplier, it became a zero supplier. And that means we went along with every sanction that the Americans had imposed, even if it adversely affected our energy security and our strategic interest. So, really speaking, it is India that has to take a fresh look at the strategic importance of dealing with Iran. My own suspicion is that our hesitation in pursuing this relationship has meant that the train has left the station. I don't believe that the Iranians, see, the chance was there. The Chabahar project and the connectivity projects were first discussed in 2003, 20 years ago. And therefore, if for 20 years we have not made progress, invariably subordinating the Iran relationship to our ties with the United States, I am not making a value judgment here. I am not saying whether this was good or bad. I am simply saying that we had a factual position is we have subordinated our relationship. My question is very simple, that whatever may have happened in 2004, 2005 in the context of our nuclear agreement with the Americans, I am unhappy that we went along with the Trumpian sanctions because they hurt our strategic interest crucially. We should have had the development of the port. We should have had the connectivity project with Afghanistan, Central Asia and Moscow. But we gave up on all of that. Now it's too, I suspect that it's not easy to pick up the relationship where we left it. Iran is now a member of the SCO. It has now got a kind of accord, a peace agreement with the Saudis, and they are engaged with each other. Various Gulf countries are opening missions in Iran. And then there is, once this problem is resolved, many other things might happen of a positive character. Peace in Yemen, peace in Syria has already been absorbed into the
Yeah.
into the Arab mainstream. India is not a player in the region in the strategic sense. That train passed long ago, and we are not there. Whether it can be recovered or not, it's a matter of speculation. But this arrangement, this nuclear arrangement, has nothing to do with any of these issues.
Yeah. Fascinating as always, Ambassador Talmiz. Let's see where the Biden administration goes with Iran, and one wonders whether after if he's re-elected, will the thing be firmed up, or will the next administration knock it off the table? We don't know. Ambassador
Yes.
Talmiz, thank you very much for that insight. Great as always talking to you.
I wish you all the best. Thank you.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media and Twitter. Thank you and good night.